Let's continue on with 32 teams and 32 shows.
Oh, yeah. Fire it up. We're going down to the heat of Arizona. Can the Cardinals sneak into the playoff picture once again this year?
That's good. Did you?
I kind of didn't know where I was going.
I was going to say, you were making that up on the fly, and it worked. Hey, it worked.
I made it up on the fly for sure.
I did. I saw the hamster on the wheel. I saw it turning, and you know what? It worked out well. Bravo, my friend. Bravo. Arizona Cardinals, 11-6 last year, second in the NFC West, lost in the wild card round to the Rams. Started off like a ball of fire, this team, and then slowed down as the season went on. Started off 7-0, closed things out 4-6 on the year. That was a playoff berth for them, though, for the first time since 2015. Cliff Kingsbury, of course, is your head coach, also calls the plays for this squad. Vance Joseph is your defensive coordinator. So the one thing kind of looming here, Wes, as we head into the season with this team is DeAndre Hopkins suspended for the first 6 games of the season. So you are going to have, arguably the best hands in all of the NFL, arguably a top 5 receiver in all of the NFL. Not on that, not playing for this team for the first 6 games of the year in a very, very competitive division as it is anyway. So I'm not gonna say that DeAndre Hopkins not being out there for the first 60 games is some sort of death sentence for this team at all, but it certainly makes everything much harder.
Well, it's a big loss, and you're probably going to see Kingsbury and company on offense really change the game plan a little bit because as a whole, I like the receiver core, especially the younger guys. Now, I've never really been a huge Hollywood Brown guy, but he's going to have to produce, and he's going to have to be maybe the one deep threat that they're going to have down the field. I think A.J. Green, kind of a possession receiver at this standpoint.
Giants.
Oh,
we interrupt this program.
Oh, too much time. Too much time.
We left him too much time.
Too much time.
Sorry, Wes. I got really excited there.
No, that's okay. Now 9-7, by the way, extra point going to be pending. But back to the Arizona Cardinals. Green, I think, is a possession receiver at this point. But I kind of like these young guys that they have these underneath receivers that I think can be speed guys that you can get in the slot, short, intermediate passing game. A guy like Rondale Moore out of Purdue, who's in his second year. Greg Dortch, who, remember, he was a machine down at Wake Forest a couple years ago. Andy Isabella out of UMass. So they've got some good receivers that I think can kind of work the middle of the field and work the slot. So you might see Kyler as he tries to develop some timing now with Hollywood Brown. You might see him, do that a little bit. And they've got a couple good tight ends. They drafted the kid McBride out of Colorado State in the second round. And I'm sure you're going to see some double tight formations with him and also Zach Ertz, Max Williams, a former Baltimore Raven, also there. So they've got some good pass catchers. I do think that this is a huge loss with Hopkins. Of course, they did lose Christian Kirk as well into free agency. But I don't know how precipitous the drop-off is going to be right away.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, what does a guy like DeAndre Hopkins really mean to an offense? And you look at his stats, and it's one of those things where, Wes, the stats aren't always telling the entire tale because you have to account for DeAndre Hopkins when he's out on the field. And so even though the counting stats might not necessarily be there, the defenses have to figure out how to stop him.
And the fact they'll be double covered on a fair amount of possessions. So, it is going to be a loss. I think that they have the adjustment just maybe with the play calling, like I was saying, with some of those quick, real small guys, which Isabella, Moore, and Dortch, those guys are not very big target receivers, but those are guys that if they can get in space can break one for you.
There was some injury concern with Hopkins last year as well. So he played in 10 games for this Cardinals squad in 2021. They had the 4th overall offense EPA per play whenever Hopkins was on the field. They were 18th when he was not on the field. So that tells you just, again, it's not necessarily the stats on the page that tell the whole story sometimes. You have to account for DeAndre Hopkins when he's out there. And again, this offense was 4th EPA per play when he was out there for the 10 games last year. When he was not, they were 18th overall. So if we take a look at what they did in the offseason, you mentioned traded for wide receiver Hollywood Brown from the Ravens. They signed right guard Will Hernandez as well. They got linebacker Nick Vigil. And they also got Darrell Williams running back from the Chiefs, who ended up playing a pretty good amount for the Chiefs last year with all the injuries that they had at the running back position. So they end up getting Darrell Williams as well. On the way out, though, some pretty significant losses for this squad. And when you start to look at where are they going to fill the holes, I think that is the real question here for this team as we head into the year, because you lose Chandler Jones, one of the very best pass rushers in all of the NFL. You lose Christian Kirk, and listen, he's not a top 20 receiver or anything like that, but I certainly believe that him being able to stretch the field, what he was able to do in the slot, I think is something that this team will certainly miss. Jordan Phillips on the defensive line is going to be gone. Jordan Hicks at the linebacker position also gone. Max Garcia, left guard, is out of town. And then Chase Edmonds, of course, no longer there anymore either. In the draft, they had no first-round pick. They took a tight end in Trey McBride in the second round. They took defensive end in Cameron Thomas in the third round, another defensive end, and Myjai Sanders in the third round. And then they had no fourth or fifth round picks either. So it's kind of a very short draft for them, as well as a short free agency period. So we'll see what that all adds up to here from a projection standpoint for this Cardinals squad, and see what we think about if there's any bets to make on this team. We continue 32 teams and 32 shows on the other side. So finishing off here, looking at Football Outsiders, what they had to say about this team last year. Interestingly enough, 10th overall DVOA in 2021, 15th offense, 6th defense, and then the 20th ranked special teams. If we look at the projections for this year of this team, they have them at a mean projection of 7.7 wins. So you can see their win total sitting at 8.5. Football Outsiders has them nearly a full game under that. They have them at 0 to 5 wins in 21% of the simulations out there. So they run this thing a million times, and 21% of the time, this Cardinals team fell between 0 and 5 wins. 6 to 8 wins, 42% of the time, the overwhelming majority. Playoff contender kind of in that 9 to 11 range, 29% of the time. They had them making the postseason just 32% of the time in those simulations. So again, that's not the end-all be-all, but they did simulate the season a million times, and this Cardinals team only made the playoffs 32.1% of the time. In those projections and in those simulations, it had them as the 21st overall DVOA team in 2022. They came out with the 17th offense and the 28th defense. And I think what we see here, Wes, with that is just the fact on the defensive side of the ball, you lose a guy like Chandler Jones, and now you're looking at a defensive line in which, J.J. Watt, when healthy, is still a difference maker. He had an 18% pass rush win rate when he was healthy last year, which was 5th amongst all interior defensive linemen last year. But the problem is he's getting to that age, and he's gotten to that point in his career where he misses a few games about every single season now. And so outside of J.J. Watt, there's just not a lot of talent on the defensive line. And then if you look at the secondary, it might be even worse, right? I mean, you're talking about Byron Murphy and Marco Wilson and Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson. I mean, it's just a bunch of guys that are just kind of middle of the pack or lower than middle of the pack. And so I think this defense could really, really struggle this year, which is why I just don't have really any love for this team whatsoever. I mean, even at a division odds of 4 to 1, I can't even begin to pull the trigger on something.
I can't really either. I think probably the stalwart group of the defense is going to be the linebacking car, or Isaiah Simmons now in his third year out of Clemson, the former first-rounder. Zaven Collins, Marcus Golden comes over from the Giants. So the linebacking core, I think, should be solid. But I'm just looking. Now they didn't really replace Chandler Jones.
No.
And now just looking at it, it's like there's not a lot of proven pass rush there outside of J.J. Watt. So this was a team last year, by the way, that the defense, in terms of just the pure numbers, not getting any advanced DVOA or anything like that, 11th in points allowed, 11th in total yards, 7th in turnovers forced. So they kind of did live off turnovers a little bit. What's going to happen when they're not able to do that? And that's what concerns me about this team. And plus the fact that, look, we've kind of seen what Arizona does. They usually get off the fast starts and then they fade like they did last year. Not guaranteed to get off to a fast start necessarily at this schedule. You got the Chiefs at home, granted, but you got that. You have at the Raiders, you have the Rams. Now we'll see what the Rams are going to look like. I'm guessing that Matthew Stafford is going to be ready for the opener, even though they are sitting John Wolford in the preseason. So you're like, okay, is it where there's smoke, there's fire? And that what kind of concerns me. Panthers, we'll see if they're going to be improved. I think you get very diverse opinions on that team, and a lot of that's going to depend on if Christian McCaffrey can finally stay healthy. Maybe this is the Baker Mayfield prove everybody wrong year, and they're going to be upgraded on offense. They're going to need to be, or Matt Rule is going to be sent packing and looking for work.
And you look at this 9th toughest schedule as we head into 2022, and it's because it really starts to beef up there after you get through those first 6 weeks. I mean, outside of which we consider, I personally consider Seattle to be one of the weakest teams in the NFL this year, and then the Falcons as well. Outside of that, Wes, they're going to be dogs or very, very slight favorites in the rest of those, but they're in a game on the rest of that schedule after week 6,
right?
Outside of Seattle and Atlanta, where they're going to be more than a 2-point favorite in any of those. I mean, like this is so it's going to be just tooth and nail every single game for this squad. And Kelley, I look at this and I mean, I couldn't do anything but play a win total under here for this team, because I think that they come out of that first stretch probably losing one of these games that maybe we think they could win, and so with
they
that,
could easily be 2-4 in those first 6 games.
I think the only play here, and this is kind of a little bit like we talked about last night with the Niners, it's just, I think, we discussed, hey, is the Stafford thing something to watch, and is it something that could maybe plague them all season? We talked a little bit earlier this week and a little last week of maybe the Cardinals is worse, like just a longer bomb division play. But maybe what it is, Matt, is you wait through those first few games, and you hope to see a competitive Cardinals team, right? But if they drop a few of those, maybe then you just take a shot on a bomb division price at
maybe
7-8 to 1, and hope that Stafford thing is an issue.
It's all these positional units too, even on the offensive side, Wes. I mean, this is an old offensive line. I mean, I'm going to read you these names, and everybody, even if you don't know football, you're going to DJ Humphries, Justin Pugh, Rodney Hudson. Kelvin Beachum, these guys have been around forever. And so, there's very few Andrew Whitworths that were still good at 38 years old. And so you look at Pugh and Hudson and Beachum, like these guys are all on the bad side of the career arc here. And so it's an old offensive line on top of that as well. It's hard for me to buy into really anything with this squad.
Beachum right now, 33, Justin Pugh, 31. So these are guys, as you were mentioning, all in their 30s. They did sign Will Hernandez, who's only 26, a Las Vegas resident, by the way, out of Chaparral High School. Maybe he can kind of help them out. He's going to need to, at least early on.
Nothing for me on this Cardinals team. I wish I could find a reason to want to bet them 4-1 to win the division. I just can't quite get there.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.